An astrological analysis of Donald Trump, the hidden persona that drives him and will affect you and me. I'm Lynn Walker. I've been a professional astrologer and metaphysics instructor for almost 3 decades. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to listen. A little bit about me. I've accurately predicted the last 8 presidential elections using astrology. Last year in 2015, based on birth information, I stated that Donald Trump would win the presidency if the election was down to Trump and Clinton. For this 2016 election, Trump had the stronger chart to win. This has been a long and passionate election process, and my prediction met with criticism and disbelief even amongst other astrologers. One interesting thing to note, if the election came down to Trump and Bernie, astrologically, I think Bernie would have won. Bernie had the stronger chart for this election. However, Democrats wanted Clinton, and whatever Debbie Wasserman did that forced her to resign as DNC chair knocked Bernie out of the race. So if this webinar angers everyone at some point, then I consider myself having given a balanced presentation. It's time to stop fearing our future. It's time to empower ourselves, be active, and stop sitting on the sidelines complaining. An open democracy requires participation from everyone, not just 50% of the eligible voters. For transparency, I want to state that I felt the burn, but I also understand that America gets the representation that it needs for us to address our karma, and this is my interpretation. In the next webinar, I will use Donald Trump's birth chart to see how it will impact the United States and the stock market, as well as the U.S. economy, and a few social issues. My main focus in these interpretations is to understand what America's lesson is under this president. Let me first state emphatically that I'm not doing this to change your mind or to influence what you think of Trump. I do, however, think it is important to step back and take a sober look at what is ahead of us, as I've done with new administrations, events, and other leaders. I want to make public what I learned from this man's chart. Who is he behind the mask? Now that he's president, Trump's presidency will be turbulent, and America's karma will be quickened. America has gone through turbulent times before, and along the way, we'll correct our path, we'll make adjustments as needed, and we'll evolve beyond this with a higher consciousness, hopefully. It's time to stop the fear. It's counterproductive. I've met people that are in sheer panic. It is a waste of energy. We're all on this journey together, and our needs need to be focused no matter who you supported in this election. We have difficult times ahead, and a lot of growth will take place. Some growth may even be unpleasant. And as a final note, you have the choice to embrace the darkness in fear or to shine your light. Shining your light is not a passive activity. It means you get involved. It means you look past your own needs and look to the needs of others as well. It doesn't mean that you ignore any situation. It means that you trust in divine order and you do what's placed in front of you the best that you can. You'll be given opportunity, I can guarantee you that. It is a very, very active spiritual process that you will be called upon to participate in. For the non-astrologers attending the presentation, I will keep the astrological lingo to a minimum so that you can easily follow along and not get frustrated like these women. Yes, you're welcome. However, if I mention an astrological term, I will explain it to you. For the astrologers, I've made a few notations in the margins of the slides so that you can follow along easily and know what I'm talking about. And there are a few things to note. I think of an astrological chart as a spiritual contract that your soul made with the universe. You were born in a particular country, in a particular city, to particular parents for a reason. Every chart, without exception, has its challenges, from the Dalai Lama to everyday house husband in Dallas. Every chart has challenges, without exception. And everyone is meant to overcome every challenge in their chart and learn through it. The universe does love you and does want you to succeed. When it comes to planetary aspects, sometimes a really good aspect can make you lazy with the expectation that things will be handed to you. And at the same time, a hard aspect can make you more resilient and determined if you don't withdraw and become resentful. So good isn't always good and bad isn't always bad. Secondly, you have free will to determine how the planetary energy is used, meaning positively or negatively. Each planet and each sign has a positive and a negative aspect to it, as well as the houses associated with the chart. Often there are conflicts in the chart, but some aspects, if present, can offer a relief valve, so to speak, or a go-to respite that can take the pressure off of you, but you have to know where they are. And in Donald Trump's chart, I'll point some out. Trump's mother, Mary, was a poor Scottish immigrant when she met his father. She married Fred in January of 1936. Mary Trump became a U.S. citizen on March 10, 1942. Trump has been married 3 times and has 5 children from those relationships. From his astrological chart, you can see that Ivana was probably too independent for him. He realized he wasn't the center of her world at some point and that she had ambitions of her own. Marla probably had too strong a character and was feistier than the other women he dealt with. That marriage was short-lived. Melania probably has a better understanding of the role demanded of her in Donald's life. I don't think she's as shallow as the media portrays her to be, and she does have her own ambitions. For those that have never seen an astrological chart, here is Donald Trump's chart using the Placidus house system on the right and the whole house system on the left. For any astrologers viewing this presentation, I use both the Placidus and the whole house systems in my interpretations because I think both have good information to offer. Donald Trump is a Gemini, meaning his sun at birth was in the astrological sign or constellation of Gemini. He was born on Friday, June 14, 1946 at 10:54 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in Queens, New York. This information is considered AA reliable as reported on his birth certificate, a very reliable source of information as opposed to someone's memory or hearsay. As for this presentation, some of the things I'm going to state may be obvious because of what you've learned or seen of him in the debates and during his speeches or what you've read. This presentation will tell what is beneath that and what motivates him. I'm going to go through all of his planetary positions and give you an interpretation as to how he uses that aspect in his life. Whatever he thinks, says, or does impacts the way he views and operates in the world. That's true for all of us. As president, that means he will enact his strengths as well as his weaknesses in his job, which will ultimately affect all of us through his national and global policies. Sometimes the universe waits for people to get on a global stage of some sort before it reins in their ego. This is something we're going to witness with Trump's presidency. At first glance at his chart, you can see that his sun and moon are in angular positions, meaning that what you see is what you get. In other words, nothing is really hidden except what he's thinking, but you will see the resulting confusion from his thoughts. Generally speaking, he's an extrovert, and he has periodic introverted tendencies when he needs to emotionally recharge. He's destined to be a global figure, positively or negatively. Remember, he has that choice. He makes his own opportunities. There's a lot of cardinality in this chart, meaning that he's great at starting things, not so good at finishing them. He lacks any earth in his chart, and that was really rather obvious, but still a surprise. So money, relationships, and moral issues are prominent in his life. He lacks practicality and isn't grounded, and he lacks patience. The planets in Trump's chart form a bowl shape. To astrologers, these configurations have meanings. One of the needs of the person that has a bowl configuration is described by Clement in her book Aspect Patterns. And she says, all information coming into a bold person's awareness should fit into the individual's worldview. The worst instances of spilling the bowl may occur when information doesn't fit, causing cognitive or emotional dissonance for the person. In other words, in Trump's head, he has a view of the world, and everything in his world has to neatly fit into that bowl. When something doesn't fit neatly, he's thrown off balance until he can find some way or somehow to make it fit. This is the pattern of a true controller. In Trump's chart, the bowl occupies the 10th through the 4th houses. He leads with the rebellious and unpredictable planet of Uranus, which is how he goes through life. He hates having anyone tell him what to do. He craves freedom and independence. He sees himself as a vehicle for change and rules like a dictator, the true controller. He needs and wants his family involved, which would involve that 4th house, in his career, and seeks to contain his world in that bowl in an order that he can understand. Oftentimes, he will create crises that upsets his bowl perspective and gets himself into jams because the bowl type person only understands half their chart, which is indicative in this diagram. Only half the chart is covered with this bowl. They're trying to get outside the bowl or seek the other half of their chart, and it oftentimes doesn't fit into their bowl perspective, and they create jams for themselves. Now, when I'm talking about the fact that his bowl, or the bottom part of that bowl, is in the 4th house, he needs his family to step in and help him out. The presidency may be one of those unanticipated jams that he's got himself into. This man really relies on his family to help him, and I'm not surprised that he has requested security clearances and has offices for them. He's got plans for them whether they like it or not. Now, planets talk to each other by different aspects that they make within a chart. And so in this particular slide, I'm going to talk about the sun, but the sun's influence is going to be felt with the other planets and in the other signs encompassed in his chart. So let's start with the sun. And not surprisingly, there are many aspects to his sun making him restless in seeking an ego identity. It's very important that he builds a career and a name for himself. He will capitalize upon his strengths and is confident in his own success. However, his weaknesses will be publicly exposed as well. Family issues are often made public, and he's got what we call an angle or a sextile, so it's a 60-degree angle to Mars, which makes him very, very confident in his success, amongst other things. He will not back down from any opposition, and sometimes to his own detriment. He likes the challenge and needs to be the victor no matter what. He fears being thought of as weak and vulnerable and needs to prove himself. There is a need for some kind of win in any situation, even if the win is only perceived in his mind, such as calling people losers or calling Hillary a nasty woman. He will control people with his words. He likes to argue, and he forces his point of view onto others. Now, Trump will constantly surprise people, and he thrives on that. He has a strong drive to rebel and to be free and dislikes routine and restrictions. Like it or not, he has a certain level of charisma that appeals to some. He's impulsive, and he needs to take responsibility for his irrational behavior, but he won't, because there are things in his chart that are working against that. However, he gets away with it, so why should he stop? Trump has successful leadership abilities if the focus is on benefiting people instead of self-gratification. His sun trine Jupiter is a great aspect, but it can make him lazy and a drifter. It's a very lucky aspect, and most people would definitely want to have it in their chart. However, he can be positive and he can be an optimistic person and uplift other people. But by the same token, there's so much self-centeredness in this chart, it almost makes it seem that it's only positive if it benefits him personally. Now, Trump will sometimes jump into new experiences just for the sake of doing it without even thinking of the consequences, like running for president. Although I'm not surprised about that, it is definitely a move that's in line with his chart. He holds a grudge even when most would have dismissed it. You could see how displeased he was at the 2011 Correspondents' Dinner where Seth MacFarlane roasted him about his presidential bid. He went on and, of course, won the presidency, but he needed to show people that he could do it. He has a sharp mind for business and recognizes a deal when he sees one. He can be future-orientated if he can get past his self-centeredness. He's not one for patience, especially when patients are needed to understand very serious and complex topics. He's got a good acumen for financial negotiations, for his own benefit anyway, or we'll see what he can get out of any negotiation. Successes can be clouded by deceit here. In my next webinar, I will talk about how America will see him and the financial impact he'll have over the next 4 years. That is really going to be important for all of us to brace ourselves for. Trump is very social. He can attract money, material things, as well as people to help him in his endeavors, and he will also reciprocate. He's self-indulgent, and he's vain, and he thinks very, very, very highly of himself, even though behind the mask, he is very, very insecure and needs to prove himself. If he thinks you don't recognize or appreciate his virtues and abilities, he will be more than happy to tell you about them or that he is a superior person to any and everyone in every category. This is an important characteristic of Trump. His insecurities will be very public, and that will play out on the international scene. When I cover Trump's impact on America in the next webinar, I will also cover his international status and implications. Now, Trump finds it hard to relate to people. Behind that mask, he feels isolated and alone, even though he's always surrounded by people. He will transfer all of that high energy that he has into his work and career to keep from feeling isolated and alone. Remember, this is a man that's trying to prove himself and cares very much what people think of him. He can incite violent reactions in others if he tries to dominate them. We've already seen that in this election cycle. People feel threatened by this president, and that shows up in his chart. This is important on an international level. He will have trouble, and his ego will be hurt. No matter what your opinion is, you're going to have to take a stand one way or another with him. He incites a visceral emotion in people. And this is also present in his chart. No one is on the fence with this man. You'll have an extreme emotion, positively or negatively, of him. No one will be on the fence. In business, Trump has good organizational skills, and he will delegate all detailed tasks or tasks that he isn't interested in doing or even learning about. He isn't a detail-oriented person. He sees himself, literally, as the only one that can repair what is broken. Trump will eliminate any obstacles in his way, and he's got an obsessive drive to achieve his goals. He will want to leave any tense or restrictive or overbearing situations and jobs, or, again, delegate them out so that he doesn't have to do any of the grunt work, so to speak. And this will alleviate any burden for him, although he will get the glory when something actually happens that is good. He can transform situations, but his efforts will backfire if he uses Pluto's energy for personal gain. He will only listen to people that are useful to him, and he will surround himself with people that think like him and will support him. It will be in business and family life where he will publicly face his shadows and the repercussions from his behavior. People see him as a rebel. Trump brings out the desire for change in people, and that can be for the good or the not so good. Home needs to be a relaxing, safe place, which is probably why he chooses to operate from there. It needs to be opulent. It needs to be a reflection of how he values himself. It needs to be a reflection of how people will view him, or how he wants them to view him, as successful, as wealthy, as someone to reckon with, especially on the world stage. He has a fear of being alone and vulnerable. Foreign women have an impact in his life, and the differences are attractive to him. He does have a foreign mother and wives, too. He's looking for a woman to bring intensity to the relationship. Now, both want to control in the relationship, and generally their hurtful arguments will be mistaken for intensity, when in fact they just really don't get along. Trump has difficulty dealing with women anyway. His relationships are not stable and will undergo many changes. Emotional relationships, business relationships, relationships with his wives, their intimate one-on-ones, they're stormy and argumentative. With the moon opposing Uranus the way it is in his chart, he's going to be rash, and he's going to be driven by that irrational emotion, the overreaction. We've seen it in his public displays. He views relationships as confining, but he can't be without one. He needs that support. He needs to know somebody's there. There's a fear there of exposure and vulnerability that makes him want to control his mates. Trump and his women, or Trump will attract women that will try to emotionally control him, as well as he will try to control them. Jealousy and control issues eventually smother his relationships, and he will expect absolute loyalty from not only his partners but his employees, especially his female employees. But he wants to be on a pedestal. He wants them to look up to him. Mercury is out of bounds in Trump's chart. An out-of-bound planet's behavior is exaggerated, extreme, or even unpredictable. Mercury rules communications, making his methods of communicating extreme. His mind and his mouth are not on the same page. He's loud, belligerent, and his thinking and speech are dominated by emotions. There's an extreme need here to be heard and to have the last word and to dominate the conversation. He uses words as a weapon to incite fear and to get submission. For instance, when he said he would sue Hillary Clinton, that's his favorite phrase. And it usually works. It usually gets him what it wants. But now he's on the national stage. And this is another reason why he likes Twitter as his preferred communication tool. He can have the last word and be heard above all the other conversations. One interesting thing is that even with the out-of-bounds Mercury, he has trouble making himself understood. Emotions get in the way of logic in communications. He needs help to reach a logical conclusion because the emotions are getting in the way here. And this is where his family and partners will come into play. But he can also be blind to another point of view. He isn't wise about choosing his battles either. Resurrecting the battle with Rosie O'Donnell is just plain crazy. He easily gets sucked into the battle and has to win or at least have the last word. Now, it's one thing to go after an entertainer, but it's another thing to have emotional outbursts when you're dealing with international leaders, especially the ones that we know out there that do have short fuses. I will speak about America's image in the next webinar, but right now I want to concentrate on his personal chart and seeing what he's bringing to the table. Now, Not surprisingly, Trump has better communications with men rather than women. His thinking is unclear. He's got a Mercury squaring Neptune. His thinking is unclear, and plans are not thoroughly thought through enough, and they can be problematic for him. Part of him is idealistic, and he cannot see the full picture. There are dishonest people around him, or he himself will be deceitful, and he won't want to interpret his actions that way. In his mind, the ends justify the means. There is another problem here. He's got an overactive imagination, and he likes to live in a fantasy world, and that goes back to that bold pattern that I was talking about earlier. His mind is often racing, and he's obsessively driven by the need for security. Now, Trump wants to be around beauty and associated with it. It helps build his ego. He seeks excitement and validation through relationships with women, and he needs new sexual affairs to make him feel vital. This man has a high sex drive, and he's easily bored in relationships and can't handle routine, and he needs to learn that there can be freedom and intimacy in a relationship. And he may, as a father, keep his loved ones at an emotional distance. Love and affection are restrained and cold. He needs to shine and be the focal point in any relationship. Only then will he relax and reciprocate. This man has Mars in Leo, and he's determined to show the world his worth and what he can do. He needs to stand out in a pack, and he needs to be noticed and acknowledged for his efforts and achievements. He wants the world to see how wonderful he is, how intelligent he is, how much money he can make, how savvy he is. This is very, very important to him. He's charismatic and direct, and there's a magnetic quality to him. He's self-centered and oblivious to how his actions affect others. And he wants to be free to do as he pleases without any restrictions at all. And Trump will fight if attacked or strive to prove himself correct. He's got a lot of energy, and you can see that considering how old he is. He had enough stamina to keep up on the campaign trail and to fight back when he wanted to. He wants to be the way shower. He wants to be the leader, and he wants to be acknowledged for it. He's got a lot to prove in his mind. However, conflicts seem to follow him wherever he goes in his personal life as well as his business life. It seems that there's a tendency here for him to look for battles so that he can prove himself, and he wants and needs to be seen as a formidable opponent. He may try to dominate others or groups of people and will release explosive anger and not care about the outcome. That's not a good trait for a president. Diplomacy is not his strong suit. Trump needs to learn through his own experiences and to get feedback from the relationships he has with others. But he doesn't listen to others and assumes that he knows what's best for himself and other people without even asking. There is a tendency to overcommit himself or to get into situations that he can't fulfill. And I hope that's not foretelling of his presidency. His ability to negotiate and communicate with others got him where he is today. He's a very lucky man, and he's got a very good placement of Jupiter. He likes the thrill of the gamble in a business deal. And he's a quick learner, although may not follow the rules, and he definitely doesn't think he should have to. Saturn makes him doubt himself and brings balance to his sensitive ego. It is not a good placement for Saturn. Saturn's in its detriment in his chart. It's in Cancer. When a planet is in detriment, that means it is in a weakened position or a difficult position in the chart, and the planet can't fully express himself. He wants to be commanding, respected, and authoritative, but people see him as being too emotionally explosive and unpredictable. There's a deep tendency to feel inadequate and critical of himself. He feels the need to change himself, but is always looking at past slights and pain and things people have done to him. He nurses a grudge, and his feelings are easily hurt. He needs to feel superior to others. He's clannish, and he feels responsible for family. He needs constant reassurance and to be told he's wonderful. If you don't tell him, he will tell you and expect you to acknowledge his accomplishment. As I will discuss in the next webinar, he has to surround himself with people that think like him. He'll listen only to those that can push his agenda. Even if he is successful, he will still be restless with everyday burdens and routines. And even if he is successful, he's still going to be restless because it's never enough. Responsibility and stress bring on health issues, and he needs to pace himself. If he's scattered, he's going to fail. One of the things that he wants is to leave a long-lasting mark on the world through family and business. He needs to show the world what he can and has achieved through his business and his material possessions. Uranus is at 17 degrees Gemini, and it's at a critical degree in Trump's chart. Now remember that Uranus is an unpredictable, erratic, rebellious planet, and it was also the lead planet in his bowl. When a planet is at a critical degree in a chart, the planet is doubly emphasized and its influence is heightened. Being at a critical degree makes it a sore point. In his case, it will bring major changes in his career and family during this lifetime. He needs to, or really wants to be, unrestricted in his personal life and career as well as business. He hates restrictions, and that's why he is so on board with dealing with government regulations. He hates answering to anyone, and he hates being bored. And he's kind of like a 2-year-old when it comes to being bored. He will constantly create chaos around him just to amuse himself, whether he knows it or not. He will delegate responsibilities of a position or quit because of the restrictive nature of having the job or the responsibility in the first place. Holding on could be detrimental to keeping power, which is why he needs people around him. Most of the people around him will take on the responsibilities that he really doesn't want to do, and he will go off while collecting one paycheck. He will go off, which is what, as of this date, he's trying to hold on to his businesses as well as run the country at the same time. Now, he likes the privileges that the title of president brings because it opens up personal opportunities for him to enrich himself. And that's going to be a definite conflict of interest and an issue, especially since this is at a critical degree. Now, there is the likelihood of falling from power if his Uranus is not handled properly or if dealings aren't above board. I spoke about his deception issues earlier. Trump's own needs will come before others until he can reach a point where he is self-aware enough to be comfortable with himself. His life will always be unpredictable and chaotic because it is led by Uranus. And he has a deep conflict in his chart. There's the desire to be free versus the fear of unpredictable change and instability. That's a hard one since he can't let go easily. From what I know about his chart and from what I observed from his speeches and his behavior in general, his Neptune energy is being misused. He could use it for compassion and helping those in need or in dealing with deep psychological issues and resolving them. He is using it negatively instead. He has to learn how to let go of material attachments. His self-worth is tied to his possessions. Trump can be a swindler or be swindled and become resentful and vengeful in personal and professional partnerships. He sees nothing wrong with Trump University. In his mind, he will look at it as it was a good deal. They took it. If they didn't understand it, they shouldn't have done it. And that's an abuse of Neptune. He has communication issues. It will be hard for him to make himself understood. He has a problem with continuity of thought and speech. Neptune makes his communications foggy, scattered, and confusing. He will try to convince others that he didn't say or mean what he actually said, and will try to rationalize it if he can't convince you that he didn't say it. This is a smokescreen, and the need to control the dialogue. Remember, he's a controller. Misunderstandings are likely with the confusion and fogginess that Neptune brings. He's idealistic, and he has an addictive attitude in relationships. He wants that ideal Hollywood romance that people will envy. This position of Neptune also stimulates psychic perceptions or even intuitive hunches, probably the latter, considering the deals that he makes and how he lives his life. Now, I've already stated two areas in Donald Trump's chart that are of concern. Number one is the Saturn that's in detriment, which makes him very unsure of himself and makes him overcompensate. And Uranus, that not only is in a critical degree, but it's also the leading planet in his bowl. Those are two areas. There's another area. This one I'm probably more concerned about. It's Pluto being in Leo. It is out of bounds also. And this explains a lot regarding his behavior. Remember that an out-of-bound planet's behavior is exaggerated, extreme, and or unpredictable. Pluto rules control issues, jealousy, possessiveness, sexual behavior, and revenge, amongst other things. He will exhibit these traits to the extreme. He has high sexual desires and a dominating need for control and power over others, especially his mates. He will be overbearing, and this is where that bullying comes in. And it's all a mask because he lacks confidence. He has an obsessive need to control everyone, including his children and everything in his life, and that goes back to that bowl. He wants respect but can't get it, and he subjugates people to try to get it, but it's not the kind of respect that he wants. Everything in his world centers around his ego, and he needs to be aware of subconscious behaviors and thoughts that have been carried over from childhood that are no longer appropriate. Examples are the name-calling and the rudeness demonstrated in the debates. People he's ticked off will conspire against him, and he doesn't forgive, nor is he easily forgiven. That's an interesting piece of karma he's going to have to work through, because now he's on the global stage. It is important to further examine this trait because he will carry it out on the global stage and will eventually affect your pocketbook. Herein lies my interest in doing the next webinar. Now, whether Trump likes it or not, he's going to have to face his shadow side or the darkness of himself in order for him to get the recognition that he's really looking for. He can influence people for the good or for the bad, and he will find himself battling people who are threatened by him. Now, I've stated those two things before, but he resists personal self-transformation to his own disadvantage. He doesn't want to change and will fight it desperately, because he doesn't think he needs to change. He will also destroy structures and practices that have negatively affected him, which may be for the good or for the bad of the country. That story is still to be told. If he does anything to resolve the tax situation, then hey, that's a plus. But we don't know what he's out to destroy yet or what's on his agenda, so we will live through that. But he can't let go. His ego is too fragile. And This is a person that needs a disciplined approach to change. But on the other hand, he's going to resist. And unfortunately, we're going to have to live through that. Something interesting about Donald's chart, his progressed sun just moved into Virgo, and under this influence, there are some things that he's going to have to learn if he's going to be successful the rest of his life. Otherwise, when you refuse to learn this, you kind of get spanked by the universe in a way. So he's going to have to learn how to be truly selfless in his service. And that's going to be hard for him with such a big ego. He's going to have to learn how to be detailed and analytical as well as methodical, and that's going to be hard for him too. He's going to have to learn how to bring order to chaos and be there during the entire process of a project, or be there mentally and emotionally present for the entire presidency, and not just in the beginning or not just delegate it out. He's going to have to learn tact and logic and not to intimidate people to stroke his ego or to get his way. Trump and his cabinet will attempt to run the country as a large business without really taking the human factor involved. He is going to have to learn to listen and not assume to understand others or what others need or what others are saying without even asking them. He's going to have to learn how to gather facts and data before making a decision and not assume that he has the only answer based on his own limited experience and outlook. He seems to have the opinion that it's his way or the highway because he's the only one that is correct and he's the only one that can turn things around. He has to stop focusing on his own needs and values and focus on the values of others as well as valuing others. He needs to judge on facts, not just emotions and his own insecurities. And he also needs to learn that there can be freedom and intimacy in a relationship that can make him happy. We've all observed his behavior, and unfortunately, learning those lessons of the planets in his natal chart and the planets in his progress chart will be difficult for him, especially under the scrutiny of the global media. Spiritually speaking, though, in order to soften his heart and to mitigate his fears, he's going to have to sacrifice his ego. And we will all play a part in this task to awaken him. Also, unfortunate is the fact that he has so many questionable alliances. That is truly a dark part in his chart. Spiritually speaking, each president or any national leader takes on one or more karmic lessons for the evolution of our national mass consciousness. For Obama, it was racism. Hillary was sexism. Bernie was moral consciousness. George W. was greed. Bill Clinton was personal integrity. Reagan, elitism. Carter, diplomacy. Nixon, paranoia. Trump will make us face our fears. Lessons of self-centeredness, control, insecurity, and ego will be brought out. Thank you for attending. I hope you found it informative. One thing to note, we are all one. We're all in this together. And no matter where you stand on Trump, there is a lot to learn, and we are in for a bumpy ride. We have to focus our energy, and you have to maintain balance within yourself. There are going to be things that you're going to be called upon to do, and you're going to be inspired to do. But, again, it doesn't pay us to be divided. This is everyone's country, and the planet belongs to everyone.